Thanks so much, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. You have loved our next guest on Girls in the new great Showtime show, Black Monday, when he blew the doors off Broadway in the original cast of Book of Mormon. But did you know it wasn't always easy sailing, and his first 12 years in New York were fraught with insecurity, failures, and many life lessons? In his new memoir, Too Much Is Not Enough, Andrew Rannells details all the parts of making it that usually go unmentioned in a typical bio. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Rannells, let's hear it. Sir, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm such a big fan.
You're very generous. That's very nice of you.
I am very generous. I am a huge fan of your work. And I think that this bio is, it's such a smart take on the period of time before. I think everybody wants to write a bio or does write a bio about the moment they become famous and the famous people that they meet and the ways that they navigate fame rather than navigating that period of life before anything happens that people want to hear about.
Because there's plenty of time where if it starts really the second you say you want to do it, right? So I decided to move to New York to go to college when I was 19, but I was 26 before I got my first Broadway show. And it was a lot of time spent in New York just sort of figuring out how to get to where I wanted to go. So knowing that that is always the stuff that gets skipped over, I was like, I think that's probably actually where in a lot of ways the most meaning is in those years, because you are figuring out who you are and how you are gonna navigate the city and a career and
who your people are.
That means who your people are. And that's a big part of what this book is too, is like how I found my friends who are still my friends to this day. So I just wanted to sort of celebrate that particular part of my life because it does often get skipped over.
When did you first start writing this and how did that come about?
I started writing it. I'd always written sort of just for myself, never with the intention that
It's so important, right? It's so important to just write.
Just keep going. Yeah. So I had some things that I had worked on, and then I became friends with Bill Clegg, who is a very talented writer himself. He wrote a really beautiful memoir called Portrait of an Addict as a young man, and a great novel called Did You Ever Have a Family? So he and I became friends, and he asked me, he was like, do you have anything that you've written in any form that you would feel comfortable sharing? And so I sent him a couple essays, and he gave me some notes, and we sort of went back and forth, and then he sent one to Dan Jones at the Times, who runs the Modern Love column. And much to my surprise, it was published rather quickly. And then when there was some interest in if I had other things written, Bill had sort of tricked me into writing I had like 10 essays done. So he was like, let's take those out, kid. So I say he tricked me. But
So was it difficult for you to write? Because oftentimes you talk to people who've written their first book or their first memoir, and they're like, oh, it was hard. I had to sit down and try to write it. But it sounds like you had already written a lot of it and were sort of already enjoying the grind of writing.
I really, and people get annoyed by this, but I liked the process. I liked the, weirdly, I like the solitude of it. I mean, everything you do as an actor, really, particularly on Broadway, you're just surrounded by people. You never work by yourself. So there was something nice about just like waking up in the morning and knowing that I would have a full day that I could just focus on writing. It also timed out well that I was doing this movie in Toronto called A Simple Favor for Paul Feig, and there were days where I wasn't used, and I don't have any Canadian friends. In Toronto, I just didn't have like tons of plans on my day off in Toronto. So it worked out perfectly that I just, would sort of sit in my hotel and then finish these essays. So I really liked the process, I gotta say.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, especially if you're in film or television or even theater, it requires so many people to get a project done that as soon as you start thinking about it, you have to start thinking about that process where writing is just solely for you. You get to just create for yourself.
And what actor doesn't want to just like tell stories about themselves, quite frankly? So just thinking about like going through and thinking about these times.
You couldn't wait for the interview format to do that either. You had to do it.
I'm so excited. I just get to talk about me. And it was hard, definitely to go back through, particularly some of my teenage years, and go back and think about some of those stories and events that shaped me. Certainly, my dad dying, that's not a fun thing to relive, but all very informative and all very necessary as it's part of my background.
What was the toughest section of the book for you to write?
I think it was the dad stuff. My dad died in 2001, and that was a really that was tricky to go back because I also wanted to be mindful of the fact that I have 4 siblings and a mother, and I did want to speak for them. The fact that they have a brother who's now deciding to write a book about his childhood, like, that's not fun, probably in some ways. So I just wanted to keep an eye on the fact that, like, I wasn't trying to speak on behalf of my family. I was not trying to represent our family in any way. Like, I was just telling my version of events. So that took some finessing and some unpacking as to how exactly I remembered things versus, maybe how they remembered things. My younger sister, Natalie, was very helpful in that, like, I would send her all of the sort of family essays and say, like, can you read this and tell me if it's terrible?
If it's going to hurt anybody.
Yeah, if it's going to hurt anybody, or if you're just like, that is not what happened. Right. Because, and sometimes she'd be like, I don't really remember it like that. And then we just have to sort of figure out sort of what my truth was, and yeah.
But that said, from what I've read of the book, your family seems extremely supportive.
Very supportive.
And not to generalize, but for a kid from Omaha who came out just before going to college and wanted to be an actor, they seemed extremely supportive.
They're extremely supportive, and I have to say they've always been supportive. They've been supportive across the board. Like, it didn't matter sort of what the project was, the attention and the praise, or sometimes not the attention, is like always the same, which I think is, it's, first of all, it's very Midwestern of them, but also very grounding and really helpful. I mean, they didn't treat me any differently after the Book of Mormon than they did before the Book of Mormon, which was nice. And, my mother came out to see Pokemon live. She saw me at a dinner theater in Westchester they came to see all of the things. And also kept their distance when I needed them to, part of, I think, moving away from home is being homesick and figuring out how you're going to do this by yourself. And my family was very far away, so it wasn't like I could go home on the weekend. So I did have to just create some time for me to be homesick and figure out how to be an adult here.
You tell this story about in high school, the first sort of sexual experience that you have. And
we're going deep.
We're going to get into it a little bit because I think it's such an informative piece for young people to read, especially young people who are marginalized within their community, because it's not just a story of a first sexual experience. It's how when you are marginalized, you can be exploited. And those who are exploiting come from being marginalized as well, and they might not even recognize that they're doing it. There are so many layers to that story and the people involved in it, you as well as the 2 men, who one of which you have a relationship with and the other one is upset with you. What were you thinking about what did you learn from that story when you were writing about it as an adult?
I was very judgmental of myself at that time. I was 17 years old. I got myself involved in this relationship with a guy who was 40. I thought that I was sort of smart enough to handle the intricacies of an adult relationship, and I was not.
You write about it so smartly in the sense that this was also your only option in a way.
Well, it certainly felt that way. I mean, growing up in Omaha and going to an all-boys Catholic school, it's not like there was no, like, gay and lesbian ally meeting at my high school. Like, that wasn't a thing. And I didn't meet a lot of other young gay people. They were there, but we just were not out to each other. And I think that's something that I realized too. My best friend growing up was this kid, Joe Costello, and we were friends from, like, best friends, like inseparable, from kindergarten to 8th grade. And then when we got to high school, we just stopped speaking. And I think there was this strange, and I'd always wondered about it, and then in writing about it, I realized, I think we both recognized that we were gay and that we couldn't be too close to each other, because, like, if we were together, that somehow would draw more attention to the issue. Yes. Yeah. Which makes me sad. That was one of, like, the sadder, like, when I realized that I was like, oh, I think we both consciously made this decision to kind of pull away from each other out of some sort of weird fear of being caught or something. So that was an unexpected twist when putting together this book. But going back to the guy, no, I really didn't feel like I was. I felt like I was capable of making those decisions, but I certainly didn't know how to get out of this relationship. And I didn't realize how much that affected me well into my 20s. because I moved here and I was like, well, that's in the past. Let's move forward. And I never really dealt with what that did.
Those things fuck with your trust issues. They mess with how you relate to other people, how you get into relationships, commit to them. Yeah, those really early formative relationships, when they are with someone like that, can really break apart those periods of time where you should be having like healthy exploratory relationships in your 20s.
And that takes a little longer, I think, it certainly did for me, to have that. I mean, I had my first real serious relationship when I was 22, which is a little, not late, but, it's later, I suppose, to have like your first serious boyfriend. Yeah, I describe it as having high self-worth but low self-esteem. I feel like I deserve a lot, but I don't really deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that feeling
Right?
intimately. Yeah. This friend of yours that you just mentioned, Joe
Costello. Hey, Joe Costello.
Forgive me for forgetting or maybe not noticing this in the book. Did you ever get back in touch with him? Did you and him ever reconnect?
Thanks, Facebook. Yes, we are. Yes, because his family still lives in Omaha, and so we are in contact. But he lives in Denver, and I live here, and so we've not seen each other. But we are.
You ever talked about this or connected
Not
on
really.
this level?
I just wanted to talk about it behind his back, in front of a lot of people,
in public.
because that seems polite. That was not my intention to get into that Joe Costello story, but
You're gonna get a
I'm
really
just gonna
great
keep saying his name.
private message on Facebook later
Yep.
today.
I
Yeah.
can feel my phone vibrating
Hey,
now.
it's great that you're famous, but
Hey, Andy, why don't you shut your face?
when you were writing this period of time in your childhood, were there things that you realized about yourself now and about period of time afterwards that you hadn't already figured out? Like, did writing about this stuff help you sort of therapeutically work through it?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that the thing that I was not most surprised, but I was surprised by is how I really did have like a strange level of ambition at a very young age, which I didn't call it that because I don't know if it's the Midwest or if it's the Catholicism or what, but like that's sort of a dirty word to be like, I'm ambitious. Like that's not a cool thing to say out loud. But I was a real driven little dick. Like I was making lists and vision boarding and like I was doing all that shit at a very young age. And I just I didn't know what to call it, but I knew that that's what I wanted. And I mean, I guess that's what took me to New York. I think that's why I had the ambition, but also like that I was just naive enough to be like, it's all gonna work out. And I think back on like when I first moved to New York, somebody told me that if I dropped off my headshot at stage doors of Broadway theaters, that they would call me when they had auditions. It's not how that works. But I did it. I got some manila envelopes and shoved my little headshot into them and like with cover letters, and I like went door to door dropping off, and I was like, that is a ballsy kid. Who the hell is that kid? And it did end up, I mean, I gotta say, the one call I got was from Bernie Telsey, and he cast Rent at the time, but then 7 years later, he cast me in Hairspray. So it didn't work on my timeline, but it did work eventually, 7 years.
And you were 31 when you got cast in Book of Mormon? Is that true? Or
Yeah, that's correct.
30 or
That's
31?
correct, 31.
That's wild. You'd had 2 Broadway credits prior to that, right? And at the point that you got cast in Book of Mormon, how much had you been working steadily?
I mean, I'd been lucky that I had been working steadily. And that year before the Book of Mormon, I had been in Jersey Boys for about 2 years, kind of all over the place. I did it in San Francisco, and then I was in Toronto, and then I did it on Broadway. And then I had the good fortune to do some workshops and some out-of-town tryouts of new musicals. And then the Book of Mormon was one of those in the mix. So at that time, they were like, I was doing all these readings and workshops and things, and there were 3 musicals that could potentially one of them could happen. And obviously the Book of Mormon was my favorite.
Was it clear from those 3 that the Book of Mormon would most likely be the one to move forward?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they actually all moved forward, but the Book of Mormon, that was just something very special when I remember reading it for the first time and just being like, I have to be in this, and I think I know exactly how to do it.
Really?
And I'd never so clearly had that feeling before that I was like, I know how to do this.
What do you think it was that...
I don't know. There was just something about the writing and something about meeting Trey Parker and just like being in that room. And I was like, I felt oddly confident about it. I was like, I think this is going to work out.
Would you consider yourself a child of South Park in any way?
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
So, like, you were very familiar with the tone.
Very familiar, yeah. And I knew that, what they do so brilliantly, what Trey and Matt do, and what Bobby Lopez does as well, is like they write things that should be shocking, but they write it with such heart, and there's a strange innocence to it that you can get away with saying almost anything. Yeah. And it's such a crazy, wonderful skill that they all have. So, yeah, I guess I did you have a heads up knowing South Park that you're like, well, you can't just be trashy about it. Like, you have to, it has to be infused with some goodwill and some...
story. They're very, very, very good at story.
Very good at story.
Like, that is one of the reasons that they can kind of get away with anything, because you're already on a journey of some kind, and you'll move along with them. One of the things about this book, you were on Girls from its beginning to its end. How many years was that? 6 years?
6 years.
There is something very Girls-like about this book in the way of that it's very open and it's very confessional about this period of time that Girls is also kind of about. Is that something that you related to Lena on very well? Were the two of you very open about personal experiences all the time?
Very open. Everybody on that set was pretty... forthcoming about their past experiences, and I was really inspired by the way that that Lena told those stories. The way that she sort of approached everything that we did on that show was very honest and not always likable and not always pretty, but was truthful. So I was very much inspired by that. But it was a strange thing to be on that show. I was close to 10 years older than all of those women.
I have to tell you, I did not know before I picked up this book that you were the age that you were.
You are old.
Yeah. No. It's just one of those moments like, oh, wow, because my introduction to him was Girls, and everybody was 22 on that show.
And I was 32. So it was nice to go back and visit that time, but I was also happy to not be there anymore. Like, I was happy to not be.
Do you ever feel like a parent on the set? Like, were you ever helping people with issues of that age, like off set?
Oh, God, no. They're all too smart for that. Yeah, they didn't really. I mean, they played falling apart messes very well, but like they were all very pulled together women. So no, there was no life advice I could offer Allison Williams.
That's what. I know. As soon as you said that, I was like interviewed Allison like a few times. And like, she's fine.
No, she's great. She's great.
She's got it together.
She's got it together.
I want to touch briefly on the show that you're in right now on Showtime.
Black Monday.
It's one of my favorite comedies.
That's
it's
so nice.
Great.
Thank you.
What is it like putting that world together every episode? It's so over the top, but talk about story.
Yeah.
You're able to go with it because it tracks the stories so well.
Well, that's why I was really attracted to it, because it follows this very serialized. First of all, we're leading up to the stock market crash of 1987, but then also that seconds into the pilot, we see someone either get pushed or jump off of a building and die, and we don't know who it is. So we're also tracking that storyline through it, and yet it is pretty broad comedy that we're doing a lot of the times, and I just thought it was such a cool combination of genres and tones, and it seemed like it would be a really fun challenge to sort of try to find that line and walk it, because there is really sort of outrageous stuff that we get to do on that show. But then, Don and Regina and Casey and I also have like these very sort of like dropped in moments with each other, and it's rare to find something that you can do both. It really reminded me a lot actually of the Book of Mormon, just in terms of the character and the tone. Like, Blair is very similar to Elder Price in a lot of ways, that he's very optimistic, and he doesn't have a lot of practical knowledge, but he has a lot of sort of book smarts, and he learns very quickly that he has to sort of adjust his line of thinking in order to become successful in New York, and that's what Kevin has to do in Uganda. So so it reminded me a lot of that role, which was also exciting.
He has such Blair has such an interesting, where I'm at right now in it, I think I'm pretty much caught up on the last episode, an interesting trajectory in the way that it's clear that his arc and the way that he breaks and how this world breaks him is going to be completely different than everybody else, because there's sort of more on the line for him.
Yes, I think everybody is strangely...
Big question as of right now.
There's a big question, and I think some people are becoming more human, and in some ways I'm becoming less. Like I'm sort of now buying into the greed and the sort of like blind ambition of Wall Street, whereas Don Cheadle and Regina Hall's character are somehow they're finding their humanity back, and I'm losing mine, which is really also fun to play.
But they've also presented a new stake for your character that makes him want to lose his humanity even more, right?
Yeah.
His confusion is something in the way, and we see the sort of older version of that with Paul Scheer.
Yes, exactly. And is that the path he wants to go down? Yeah. Yeah.
I love the show. I think
Thank
it's
you
so great.
much.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're enjoying it.
Let's get a couple questions from the audience. Who has a
boy.
right here? Hi.
Hi. Which of your projects have you had the most fun with?
I mean, the Book of Mormon, I think. I mean, I've had a lot of fun doing a lot of things, obviously. But that was a really special moment in my life and weirdly in all of our lives that, like, Josh and Rory and Nikki and I all were, had this crazy experience that we got to share together. And it was really thrilling to get to do that with friends, to like just look around and be like, I can't believe this is happening to us. That was a really special time.
What was it like to watch that show take off the way that it did? I mean, because I saw that show late, and even after having been told it was brilliant, it was genius, I still was shocked at how brilliant and genius it was.
It's pretty crazy. It's a crazy show. I mean,
that there were families in
I
there
know.
watching
Well, it played Salt Lake City not that long ago. The tour went to Salt Lake, which I was just amazed by. But we knew we would find an audience. We knew that they had a fan base, that Trey and Matt had this fan base that would come and support the show. But we certainly didn't realize that it was going to be as sort of universally accepted and loved as it was.
Yeah, it transcended that fan base very quickly.
Really quickly, yeah. So we were lucky.
Yeah.
We're lucky.
Next question. Hey.
I'm over here. Was there any story that you didn't include the book that you would like to, and if so, why?
I feel like I kind of left it all on the table on this one. There really wasn't. I mean, it was weird. What was strange is that sometimes people, like some of my closest friends that I spent a lot of time with in that period of my life and still spend time with, didn't sort of pop up as much as I thought. Going back to that thing of like not telling someone else's story, that was very important to me. That like I wasn't going to just be like sharing drunken stories about my friends who have like, high profile jobs today. That I was like, this is my book. I don't want to drag you down with me. So things like that I found myself maybe not necessarily leaving out, but just sort of like refocusing. I was like, I don't need to tell other people's garbage. I've got enough of my own I can share. So that's what I did.
The title is Fumbling Toward Adulthood. I've always found that I still don't know what adulthood is, and as much as I like to say I'm an adult now, I'll the day after find myself in a place like, God, I'm still a child. When do I get to just be comfortable and be an adult?
I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, I keep like moving the line a little bit. I'm like, well, when I have this job, or well, when I buy an apartment, or well, when I keep adjusting it, but I'm still tripping around myself. So
You're still fumbling?
I'm still fumbling. Fumbling at 40.
That's the next book.
That's the next book.
Yeah.
That's the next book.
One more question.
Hi. So I was just wondering what your collegiate experience was like, and whether you think it's worth it or not for people in the entertainment industry to go to school.
Tricky. You know what? My collegiate experience was I moved here to go to Marymount Manhattan on the Upper East Side. I was studying acting. I was in their BFA acting program. I studied for 2 years, and then I found myself with a job that I thought, maybe I should just give this a shot. I wasn't, and this is no offense to Marymount in any way, I was not thrilled by the program, also distracted by New York City. I started auditioning way too soon and cutting class to go to auditions and stuff. New York was not, I just didn't have the bandwidth to make it all work because I was so close to the thing that I wanted. So I ended up blowing off school that was supposed to be giving me the skills to get the thing that I wanted, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. But that's what I did. But I think it's a really personal choice. I think that, I have friends, Gavin Creel, who's one of my best friends. He's a huge champion of the program at University of Michigan. I think there's some really good programs, and particularly ones that are maybe not in New York. Because if you're like me, New York was very distracting. You want to do all the stuff. You want to get in there as quickly as possible. And
If you're here, you can start working in some
Yeah.
capacity.
Yeah, no, I had friends, like, I remember when we were freshmen and I met Laura Benanti, if anybody knows Laura Benanti. She was, at 19, she was on Broadway in Sound of Music, and I was like, well, God damn it. What do I got to do to be Maria? She was doing it, and then I very quickly had other friends that were doing it, and so I freaked myself out, and I was like, I guess I should just be auditioning more because that's what people are doing here. But in retrospect, it would have been nice to maybe take some more classes.
Do you feel like you missed out? And if you were to take more classes, do you think you would want to take acting classes, or it would be more along the lines of like educating yourself in a different way?
Well, I think it probably would have been that. I think that, I tried to, my sophomore year, I tried to double major in art history and acting. So useful. All things that were so useful.
I did a great job.
Such a great job. And I did, and I loved it. I just, I knew that I wanted to act, but I thought, I was like, maybe I should take advantage of the fact that I'm in college and I can take all of these classes, and why shouldn't I do that and do the acting thing on the side? But it proved the temptation to start auditioning and start working just proved too great. I'm not disappointed with the way anything worked out, and I don't know what would have happened if I had gone to Michigan and had that time, and would I have moved to New York? I don't know, but it happened the way it happened.
When you were auditioning before, you said you should have been auditioning. How bad were the auditions going?
Well, that's the thing about it. I mean, some of them terribly, and then some of them great. So it's, for me, and I think for a lot of actors, if you get a glimmer of hope out of an audition, even if you don't get the job, but you're like, oh, I impressed them. I'm making my mark. It just makes you want to do it more. If I had been bombing everything, it would have been very clear to me that this is not what I should be doing. But I was doing well enough to get callbacks and in the room, so I felt close enough. I wasn't booking the job, but I was close.
People liked you.
People liked
it seemed
me.
like you were just starting and you could possibly make something.
Yeah.
What was the worst part-time job that you had while you were acting? Did you have any?
So many. The worst one I had was I was a greeter at the Warner Brothers store, which was on 57th and 5th, and I had to wear a Letterman jacket that had all of the Looney Tunes characters on the back, and I had to stand in front of
Do you still have that jacket?
No, I didn't even get to keep it. It was I also walked out.
Oh, fair.
I quit in a huff.
You could have walked out with the jacket.
I should have, but they would have come for me. And I had to stand at the front of the store and say, welcome to the Warner Brothers store, 8 floors of fun. That was my only job. And then people would ask me about merchandise or what floor is the baby stuff on. I'd be like, I don't fucking know. I don't work here.
8 floors of fun. 8 floors of Warner Brothers related material.
Yes. And there was a
sparsely put out.
There was a jewelry floor. There was a home goods store floor. There was all of these. It was crazy.
But all the home goods store, was it a toilet seat with the Thomas Crown Affair on it or something?
This was mostly cartoons.
Oh.
Yeah, it got it.
It was that kind of.
That's dark.
Yeah, it's that darkness.
Yeah, the darkest thing that we sold were Tweety Bird mud flaps.
Yeah,
that was
that's the darkness.
That was
right
bad.
there.
And a woman asked me for them one day. That's the day I quit. This woman asked me if I knew where the Tweety Bird mud flaps were, and I was like, I'm out. And I said to my manager, I was like, I'm going home. And she was like, are you sick? And I was like, sick of the store.
I'm sick of telling women where the Tweety Bird mud flaps are.
I'm leaving. I'm leaving the Warner Brothers store. So that was, that one.
Did you feel good when you left, or was it a good feeling and then very quickly uh-oh?
No, I was so relieved, and then I was very relieved. I was bad at keeping jobs. I was really bad at keeping, I worked at a number of restaurants for one night where I would do shadow for a night and then be like, I don't want to do it. There was a place by Columbia called Nacho Mama's, and I worked there for one evening, and then Nacho Mamas. I don't think they're still there.
Is that an intentional pun, or is it
duh.
Okay, just making sure.
And I was supposed to be a host, and I trained for one night, and then I was like, I'm not coming back. And they thought I had been abducted or something. The guy kept calling, and he was like, I just want to make sure you're okay. And I was like, oh yeah, I just didn't want to come back. And he was like, well, maybe give a guy a heads up next time. Just say you don't want to do this.
And you're like, I don't care.
Yeah, I really don't care, Nacho Mama.
Nachos that are Nacho Mamas.
Nacho Mamas. Yes.
Andrew, I love the book. Congratulations. I love
you so
Black
much.
Monday and all of your work. It's such a
You're
pleasure to
very
have you on
nice.
stage.
Thank you so much for having me.
The book is called Too Much Is Not Enough. It's on shelves today.
Today.
So people go to a local bookstore and buy it. But if you can't, use Amazon or whatever you can to buy
Whatever
it.
you need to do. But yes, a local bookstore would be lovely.
100%. Andrew Rannells, everybody. Let's hear it.